I just think that our tenacity and creativity in what we had, didn't have gobs of money to go out and spend. We didn't have gobs of money just to throw at paid search, which makes no sense because the cost of acquisition is more than the lifetime value of a pet, like kind of stuff. We had to be creative and create more sustainable approaches. And that does take longer. But when I look at our results and look at what Embrace has become, it's a really solid company based on a really solid base. And that isn't rocked so easily by challenges. So I feel very proud of that, of what we've built.
Let's discover what people are building in the greater Cleveland community. We are telling the stories of Northeast Ohio's entrepreneurs, builders, and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Laura Bennett and Alex Krooglik, co-founders of Embrace Pet Insurance, which was sold in 2023 for $1.5 billion to JAB Holding Company. The duo founded Embrace Pet Insurance after graduating from Penn's Wharton School of Business in 2003 and moving to Cleveland, where they built it and grew this e-commerce specialist insurance company selling pet insurance directly to pet owners from their first policy sold in October 2006 to insuring over 500,000 pets across the country and handling over 4.6 million claims to date, with more than 1 million in 2023 alone. Having both stepped away from their business a few years prior, this conversation is a truly reflective one. We cover the crucible moments for the company, effectively creating a new market category and overcoming the complex regulations of pet insurance, the evolution of their relationship as co-founders, the sheer tenacity, persistence, determination, and consistency required of entrepreneurship, earned lessons on founder equity and on company ownership, becoming one of Jumpstart's first investments here in Cleveland, the significance of immigrants in entrepreneurship in the US, and a whole lot more. I believe Laura and Alex's story is one that should be familiar to far more in Cleveland than it may be, and I'm very excited to share it with you today. So please enjoy this awesome conversation after a brief message from our sponsor. Lay of the Land is brought to you by John Carroll University's Boler College of Business, widely recognized as one of the top business schools in the region. As we've heard time and time again from entrepreneurs here on Lay of the Land, many of whom are proud alumni of John Carroll University, success in this ever-changing world of business requires a dynamic and innovative mindset, deep understanding of emerging technologies and systems, strong ethics, leadership prowess, acute business acumen, all qualities nurtured through the Boler College of Business. With 4 different MBA programs of study spanning professional, online, hybrid, and 1-year flexible, the Boler College of Business provides flexible timelines and various class structures for each MBA track, including online, in-person, hybrid, and asynchronous, all to offer the most effective options for you, including the ability to participate in an elective international study tour, providing unparalleled opportunities to expand your global business knowledge by networking with local companies overseas and experiencing a new culture. The career impact of a Boler MBA is formative and will help prepare you for this future of business and get more out of your career. To learn more about John Carroll University's Boler MBA programs, please go to business.jcu.edu. The Boler College of Business is fully accredited by AACSB International, the highest accreditation a college of business can have. I'm always thinking about where the best place to start these is. And I was thinking that if I were to tell a random Clevelander, even one who may listen to this podcast and have their own entrepreneurial proclivities, that there was an insurance technology organization handling many millions of claims, covering hundreds of thousands of lives, that was acquired in the early 2020s in a deal estimated to be $1.5 billion. I am not sure that Embrace Pet Insurance would be top of mind for folks. And maybe that's because people think about human insurance and not pet insurance. But to me, your collective story is one of these incredible local stories that I am very excited for many more to learn about and to hear. So thank you for coming on to share it.
It's good to share this, which has been a long time coming.
Absolutely. So I'd love to start with how the two of you with origins in completely different places internationally around the world, respectively, find yourselves as co-founders in Cleveland?
Well, so Alex and I, we were considering who was going to say what. So I've been assigned the founder story. I mean, each of us have our own stories, but we both met at business school, and we had friends whose cat got sick. They spent over $5,000 on their cat back in 2001 at the veterinary hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. So very expensive place. And they said, we should have had pet insurance because they came from the United Kingdom. And back then it was over 12% cats and dogs insured. So it was actually fairly common kind of insurance. And they just hadn't got around to it. They looked at what was available in the US, kind of like would have, should have, could have got, and it was terrible. It just wasn't adequate, and it wouldn't have helped them in their case. And so they came to do entrepreneurship. They said, let's see if this is a good idea for a business plan, and started that. Now, I was the only one in insurance in the class of 760 people. We went to Wharton. We basically, four of us put together this business plan. And it was very interesting to look at it. In some ways, it was a bit of a joke. It seems so silly, pet insurance, right? But then I realized it was real for me. It was like a real thing, like that had real consequences. And I knew lots of pet owners. My mum was a vet tech. I could understand why people would want this. Yeah. And adding in this actuarial, that's my background, actuarial focus on it, designing product. So that's where I came from. And Alex can he could say, but we both were there looking for something different in it. And it just happened that this turned out to be the thing. At the end of it, we won the business plan competition, split ways as the team of four into two teams of two, and moved on. And we co-founded Embrace Pet Insurance. And so that's how we ended up doing that. It was a strange thing. And I think for me personally, Alex was a very perfect partner in that we are very different people, we have complementary skills and knowledge, but we both saw the same vision and the same future. So we were both running together in the same way. So I think we brought a lot together to create a good start. And we both worked our asses off. That's good to have in a partner. and our families became family, literally. Yeah. We both had young children. We both had babies at that time. So we have much fun and mutual admiration together, I think.
Totally agree. Everything Laura said comes to.
What I was going to ask is, I'd love to understand what transpired over the project at business school that allowed you to change your perspective from, this is something that maybe is more of a joke, to taking it seriously, to both actually commit yourselves to building a company together.
So I thought it was an interesting idea, and certainly a great lens through which to take a bunch of classes at business school, right, to work on something meaty and fun and different. But I didn't have an insurance background, although I did have an analytical background being an engineer. So I found it kind of interesting. And the journey towards it, one of the professors at Wharton said, you should validate your idea, go do some marketing. So I'm like, all right. So this is back in the very, very early days of Google paid search. We rustled up, off the top of my head, something in the vicinity of 2,000, 2,500 pet owners to take a very comprehensive survey on their pets, pet health, their attitudes to paying for veterinary care. And there were a handful of folks that also had pet insurance at the time, either had it or had it. And they were folded into the mix as well. We did this big study, which was the basis of one of the courses we took. And I wouldn't say I was on the fence. I was looking for validation of this idea, right? Because there was just nothing out there. There was no good information source or person was going to tell you whether this was or was not a good idea. And so we sort of let our customers or potential future customers, if you want to think of them that way, help guide our decision making. So the results of the survey were kind of eye-opening. A lot of people, we learned a whole bunch of things. People really love their pets. this is true 20 years ago and it's even truer today. Nothing has changed, not really. They love their pets. They did struggle to pay for veterinary care, and they did struggle with unexpected veterinary bills. And they weren't big fans of the products, the very few that existed at that time, in the early 2000s. So the culmination of this marketing project was a sort of about as good as you're going to get in telling you that what you're doing is the right thing. Of course, I wish we had these numbers somewhere. Maybe Laura in her archives has one of our original business plans, right? You've got your usual hockey stick of, here's where we think it
up and to the right.
And I think up and to the right, but at a very steep and increasing pace. And, the funny thing is we weren't wrong. The timescale was not what we expected, but we saw the green shoots in this market. I think when we were looking at pet insurance in the early 2000s, and to be honest, Laura, I think it was 80, maybe 100 million in premium total, entire United States market. And today it's approaching 4 billion.
Wow.
So it's grown tremendously over the last 20 plus years. And I'd like to think that survey and talking directly to these pet owners, we went to Yahoo groups back when that was a thing. Yeah. We went to the St. Bernard group and the this group and the that group. And we just barge right in and be like, hey, we're doing this survey. We're Penn students. We'd love to hear more about your thoughts on pet health and, veterinary care and things like that. And they would, send this out. We got thousands of responses, which was absolutely mind-blowing. But yeah, that was the backbone of sort of the reason why this made sense, right? We're like, man, these are real people who would spend real money on this product. Like, we've got to do this.
So when I think about early, mid-2000s, I feel like Pets.com kind of comes to mind as perennially the poster child of, the failed experiments of the .com bubble. And, layer on top of that, insurance technology, in my understanding, certainly had not been a sexy investment thesis, until much more recently, with companies like Root or Lemonade, well after you had started Embrace. And so I'm specifically curious about what the reception was, having, identified a very compelling idea at the time, to what combining, both of those areas of pets and insurance was received by people generally.
Oh my God. That was, yes, very difficult. No, there was no such thing as insurtech. No one was investing in insurance at all. It just was considered a dead end. No returns. And no one was investing in pets at all. That was just a joke. And we were in the Midwest. And we were, I was the CEO, so listing me as the CEO, as a woman. These are all very, very big challenges. And as Alex was saying to me today, we heard people say this. He said I was doing the fundraising and pitched the idea, and I heard it multiple times. Alex heard it multiple times. Why would you buy this? Wouldn't you just shoot your dog?
Oh, man.
And then I'm like, well, I know it, exactly. And so it was so strange to me that VCs couldn't think beyond what they personally would do, not, the rest of the world out there. And I suppose I sometimes still see that. But most have learned better. But it was just trying to explain, oh, and what would your wife and children say about that? And have you ever had this happen to you? And did you actually ever spend tens of thousands of dollars on your vet bills we begged you? And, you just sort of had to dig into it. So it was just a lot of persistence, so moving, we sort of accidentally moved to Cleveland, because my husband at the time ended up getting a job at Progressive. He wasn't an insurance person. He ended up moving into the Treasury Group. And so this is where we came. And we were one of the very first tranche of companies for Jumpstart. So that's where we got our initial start. And I like to think it's partly because the lead investor was Lynn Ann Grease, a woman who also could understand and was also realizing not only is this just pets and insurance and all that, it's technology. Esurance really only started around, I think, 2002. But we always, talked to Alex about, because, I sort of took insurance lead, if you like. And I said, no matter what, we cannot have any paper, no paper. We're going to go paperless. So Alex was like, okay. And so, everything was designed. Alex took marketing and technology. I was sort of a lot of that. We did strategy together. I did fundraising. I did some of the operational elements and of course the actuarial and insurance items. And between us, we pulled this together. And in some ways, I think it was better that neither of us knew how awful it was how hard it would be because of just the fact it was insurance, and insurance is incredibly difficult to innovate in, and it's regulated state by state.
Yeah.
So you have 50 plus jurisdictions to worry about, and it's not really meant for innovation. And so even today, that's the Roots Lemonades and so on of the world have realized you can't just come in and say, we'll innovate our way out of the inefficiencies.
Right.
They've done a great job in many ways, but a lot of it's still all the same that they follow, they're finding. So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned persistence, and it's my understanding that it took perhaps over 2 years to selling your first policy after an earnest, giving this a shot. And as a founder, I would imagine that could be quite a frustrating, 2-year span, which is genuinely a long time and may have required this, Herculean effort to get momentum going and keep pushing through persistence, like you said. So I would love to hear about, what those first 2 years were like. What was the first big break? How did it come together?
The first 2 years. So as Laura said, we were accidental tourists in Cleveland, and I turned up and I had stayed in Philadelphia for an additional year after business school. We were still working on the business plan, pulling levers. And I had applied for a job at Progressive myself. I was on a student visa at the time. Laura was smart enough to marry an American citizen. So I took the immigrant path to getting off my student status, and Progressive was good enough to hire me. And I spent several years there as a product manager. And in the background, Laura's feverishly, we would talk multiple times a day, very quickly. And, we were trying to get this company started. And, it was 2 steps forward and 1.99 steps back. And, we had God knows how many setbacks, but I don't know why. We were just so damn stubborn. We refused to let this thing die. And the idea just sort of took off. So there was no cloud computing back then. So we had our own server infrastructure, which is nuts because I knew absolutely nothing about servers. We knew nothing about building rating engines and the sophisticated apparatus you need to, drive sort of the under the hood operational stuff. We built our first website was, duct tape and
nice pictures.
Sticks. In hindsight, lucky we didn't get challenged with a million customers on day one because I probably would have quit right then and there. So I guess we just sort of didn't really contemplate the notion of giving up. And so those 2 years were focused on acquiring technology. Like, how would we actually do this? Theoretically we knew it, but now we actually had to build it. And I think Laura would agree with this is, we had people who had invested their faith in us, like in personal friends and mentors. And they had put money into the company, like, we can't, just can't do it. You can't, so we just kept moving forward, 0.01 steps every day. And until we launched in October of 2006, I believe, Laura, is that right? We started our first policy, but we started this journey in the middle of 2003. So it took a good 3 years. Part of it was neither of us was an American citizen or had lived in the US before. Neither of us had worked in insurance before, at least in the capacity that the underwriters in the US understood, right? Laura certainly had the insurance experience. I did not. And then there was this sort of untested nature, like, who the hell is going to buy this? It's this called program business. And, it's typically for things like, commercial liability and, business owners policies and, inland marine and boats and things like that. Like Penn insurance, due to a quirk of law, it's considered property casualty insurance. In other words, pets are a possession. And so we battled through all of this, like literally we formulated so many opinions and thoughts and hacking our way through the thicket of objections until we basically slayed them all. And people were like, fine, we'll underwrite. So I think basically we just outlasted them. We just outlasted the objections. That's how we got through 3 years.
Yeah. It was really hard, but we raised the funding first, which I thought was a miracle because you know how hard it is to raise funding, especially And then I thought we would get the insurer first. And that just shows how hard that was to get the insurer.
Right.
And we ended up partnering with Lloyd's of London, through a friend of a friend kind of thing. And meanwhile, though, it's like a tree. You start with those 5 people and then you end up branching out. And one of the ends will be it. But you have to believe that one of those ends will be the answer, that there is actually an answer somewhere. And that's what we just did not give up. And it was the same, actually. We raised our first round of venture funding October 31st, 2008. And that was a miracle beyond miracle, because if anyone remembers back then, that was the great recession. It was terrible. Lehman Brothers, there was a massive upheaval in the financial markets, and homes and real estate was a disaster. I mean, anyone who was investing as an LP and in venture funds was just like pulling what they could and saying, no, we're not doing anything right now. And it was a miracle. It was a miracle. And we made that. We just made that happen, but just wouldn't take.
And you were one of Jumpstart's earliest investments.
Yes, yeah, pretty much one of the very, very first. There were probably about 4 of us who were at the very, very beginning.
Wow.
And yeah, and in fact, when Embrace was first sold, we'd exited ourselves, but that was the first big check that Jumpstart got. And they hung in there, and it was challenging being a very early investor in us, because it took a long time to get to anything. So that hockey stick definitely happened, but it had such an extended period. I mean, we were like 1 pet at a time. It was so slow. We only raised a total of $7 million, not even, I think, around $7 million. Wow. I mean, today that's a seed round. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, now of course inflation, blah blah blah. So whatever that's the equivalent of, but definitely amongst our peers, amongst other pet insurance companies, we were by far the least funded. Mm. And I just think that our tenacity and creativity in what we had, we didn't have gobs of money to go out and spend. We didn't have gobs of money just to throw at paid search, which makes no sense, because the cost of acquisition is more than the lifetime value of the pet, like kind of stuff. We had to be creative and create more sustainable approaches. And that does take longer. But when I look at our results and look at what Embrace has become, it's, a really solid company based on a really solid base. And that isn't rocked so easily by challenges. So I feel very proud of that, of what we've built.
Well, I want to take a brief but relevant detour down what this actually looked like and how it worked. And particularly, I would imagine, again, the model most people would have in their minds for how this would work is analogous to human healthcare. But Alex, you already mentioned it's more akin to property and casualty insurance. And so what did this look like? How does it actually work?
Yeah, that's right. The pet insurance market is characterized by law in every state as property and casualty. And so property and casualty, for folks who are not from insurance, is everything that's to do with home insurance, property insurance, renters, things like that. They're all considered P&C. And most states consider that a separate line of business from life and health. So life and health would be, life insurance, the health insurance that governs, you when you have a policy through your employer, a standalone policy. And so the tricky part is the mindset you have to adopt, right? The policies, pet insurance policies behave very much like human health insurance policies. So, we start getting data into the business and it's like, this is health insurance, and that means, things like high rates of claim, high morbidity, things like that are characteristic of human health insurance. But you see the same or similar patterns in pet, but you weren't allowed to use the techniques to forecast rates and prices like you were in human health. You had to use techniques that were acceptable to property and casualty. In fact, just sort of as a real quick byproduct, this is part of the problem you're seeing now in many states like California and Florida, where the insurance markets are having a lot of difficulty with high rate increases. Partly, it's a result of the structure of the way the insurance companies respond to the regulatory environment. So the long and short of it is Pet wasn't immune to that either. We were smaller and off the radar, so perhaps we got a little bit of leeway, but not a whole lot. So we were this little itty bitty company And we had to file what are called rates of rules with pretty much every state. So we had help to do that, help in the sense of, there are companies that will do that for you, but it's all done through your underwriter. So one layer of the cake here is us, Embrace. We're the market-facing entity that people associate with insurance. But we weren't strictly legally an insurance company. We were an insurance agency. And the insurance company behind us we had a few along the way. Lloyd's of London was one. RLI was another. These are the companies that are ultimately responsible for dealing with the regulators, the individual insurance departments in each state, and doing things like rate increases. However, somewhat uncharacteristically, because Laura and I had a lot of domain expertise in pet, we were the ones going, okay, here are the calculations you need to give to the regulators. Please take a look at them. Because these outfits really don't know pet. They might have multiple programs. They might have a motorbike program, and a commercial this program, and a high-end jewelry program. And then pet comes along and it's completely weird. So a lot of, I think, the success at Embrace was due to the expertise we had in-house. We really understood insurance. And I think just as importantly, we had partners who were willing to accept that and to work with us and not at odds with us, right? So they weren't, we know more than you, go suck an egg. They were very much of the nature of like, great, we'll get this done. We'll get this worked out. But operationally, you have to file the actual wording that the customer gets. You can't change it. Once you've issued that policy, you can't change it. You can't rescind it. You're on the hook for 12 months for that policy and the price you quoted. That's it. There's no quitsies, no take backsies. And so someone once said that running an insurance business is like driving while looking in the rear vision mirror. And that's strictly true.
Yes.
So in the meantime, Laura's she dealt with a lot of this stuff. And, I was sort of the apprentice on the side going, oh, that's interesting. Didn't know that. Oh, that is weird. That is interesting. And then on the front end of the business, I'm trying to bring more policies on board and explain to people that this is how it works. And to your point earlier, Jeff, about human health insurance, like pet is not at all. Like it looks and smells a little bit like pet and human health, and it behaves a little bit actuarially like human health. In fact, maybe more than a little bit. Laura could comment more on that. That said, from the point, so that the mindset your customers have when they come to Embrace is, oh, health insurance for my pet. They expect it to cover everything. And this is where things start to get ornery because pet insurance isn't structured the same way. Real costs have to be absorbed and paid for. And you learn really quickly that you'll go bankrupt if you design the same policy in the same way. And at the end of the day, it boils down to one big thing. In human health, your policy is going to cover a lot of pre-existing conditions. And because you don't have a say, right? When you sign up for health insurance through your employer, either you take the insurance or prove that you have insurance through someone else. You don't get a say in opting out. In pet, because it's basically optional insurance, you can decide whether you want to buy it or not. The possibility exists for somebody who knows something more than you to sign up for a policy and to effectively gain the company. And I'm not trying to be a pessimist about this. I'm just ultra realistic. That's how insurance will work. If you let it happen. So bringing it all back, then you've got this product that looks and is understood to be kind of like human health, but underneath the hood is nothing at all like human health in a regulatory sense. And so we had to sort of make oil and water coexist to bring the company to fruition.
Wow.
I like that. Oil and water together. That is a perfect analogy of of what we had to do and the wizardry that you had to bring together. Yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. So I've come across recently a term that I love called crucible moments. These rare, critical, strategic decisions that define a company's journey along the way. And so from the place, where we are today of having perspective, I'd love to ask what those crucible moments were for you over the course of building Embrace.
Mine is more of I suppose it was more of an existential crisis more than a crucible moment. And Alex has more of a crucible moment, but mine was, to raise funding, and we had just spent our last dollars on our paycheck, the paychecks that went out to everyone. And there was 2 weeks till the next paycheck and we did not have the money. And so my very first investor, our first investor was a mentor of mine. And I drove up to Toronto to see him. not to ask him for money, but just to sort of, I just needed someone to talk to, who I could just say, just to let it out. It was really difficult to sort of admit that we'd run out of money and, any thoughts. But we did have a VC, that that funded us in October 31st. But this was like March of that year. And we didn't know how long it was going to get to that payout that they had promised. And so Bill Acton, was a savior to us. But he said, Laura, I could bridge you, but just tell me this is not a bridge to nowhere. And I said, I truly believe it's not. We just have to get to this whenever they're going to somehow pull this money out and get it to us. And so that was kind of, because when I was on the way there, I stopped off at a Canadian competitor, and the head of that offered me a job.
Wow.
He said, forget all that you're doing. And it would have been, I suppose, the easier path in some ways to just say, you know what, I can just go work for this. He had said, you could be the CEO. We're going to be publicly traded. It'll be fabulous. You'll be a star, all the luring things that he thought. And I was like, I just can't, it didn't even occur to me to say yes. I just couldn't even foresee that, given, we were so committed to what we were doing. And it was just, I couldn't let people down. If I was going to do to everyone, and I couldn't let, they'll be walking away. I mean, it's an interesting lesson learned, because we have a lessons learned out of this whole thing that we'll share, I guess, later in this. But I was physically ill up to this point, literally making myself ill, and I couldn't let it go. And I feel very proud of staying in. Our investors all did very well out of us staying in.
Yeah, it's deep conviction.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I remember living through that with Laura. I felt it acutely as well. Obviously, you pour a lot of energy into a company and we have it stripped away really quickly. I spent most of my days worrying about, keeping the website up and running. Remember, there was no cloud infrastructure right then. So we had our own service for this stuff. And my God, I swear, if Apple customers saw we had backup power and all sorts of stuff, but I honestly lived, I think, off Pepto-Bismol for a couple of years. Keeping the bloody infrastructure up and running, it was really, really, really stressful. And we didn't have the money to burn to, co-host to do anything more. So I felt personal weight of all of this. And so my goal was to make sure that as many things were done to lend themselves to the scalability and replicability of the business. And what I mean by that is, you had this website, you go and get a quote for a 3-year-old Staffordshire Terrier, and in zip code 44022, and you expect it to be a certain price, as it should be. Well, the problem at the time we had was that many of our systems, they were fine doing that, but insurance is complex, because once you buy that policy, you have to freeze that quote in place, and then people would call in, they'd be like, oh, I want to add a cat to my policy. Well, you had to make sure that the rate for the pets was consistent with what you had filed with the state regulators. And building that, our first few versions of that were okay, but it used to bug the hell out of me, because sometimes we'd recalculate and I'd get customer service going, I've got someone on the phone and the policy is 1 cent off. 1 cent, right? The quote they got was 2501 online, and it was, 25 exactly inside. Like, damn it. So the solution to this was to basically gut most of the internal engines that drove Embrace and to replace them with a more consistent, rule-based approach. So we did that in 2009. And I remember that project I gave myself a really bad ulcer and lost significant amounts of weight. I was working ridiculous hours, but it solved those problems completely. But they were gone. We never had any more repeats. I would love to know if Embrace is still using that technology, but it was a company in rural based out of Chicago. Fantastic for insurance. Absolutely fantastic. Game changer. So that was, to me, a real eye-opening strategic decision. It didn't make me less stressed, but it reduced how much time I spent worrying about those small things so that I could start focusing on other things. So for me, I mean, it's very much an under the hood thing, but even those things have consequences to the business. So I truly believed that was like one of the most important things we did for the health and scalability of the business and for our customers, to help make sure that what what they would charge was exactly what they would charge. So it was reproducible. We never had customer service reps coming in with weird, 1 cent off, 2 cent off errors after that. They disappeared completely. And things got slowly better on the technology front too, right? As we got, the cloud started to spin up, we were able to move some things out. But yeah, just the stress of doing that, and never again. Like, it was just horrible. The stress. So I would have an alarm on my phone. If the power went out, I'd get an immediate text alert. I had to go in 3 a.m, turn the generators on, make sure that the servers didn't run out of battery. Just the things you do. I mean, there was no one else to blame if things didn't work out. Like, if we're not selling policies, that would show up in the monthly financials. And at 3 a.m. Cleveland time, that's midnight out in California, and there's someone buying pet insurance.
There's always someone buying pet insurance.
Yes.
Lay of the Land is brought to you by Impact Architects and by 90. As we share the stories of entrepreneurs building incredible organizations in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio, Impact Architects has helped hundreds of those leaders, many of whom we have heard from as guests on this very podcast, realize their own visions and build these great organizations. I believe in Impact Architects and the people behind it so much that I have actually joined them personally in their mission to help leaders gain focus, align together, and thrive by doing what they love. If you too are trying to build great, Impact Architects is offering to sit down with you for a free consultation or provide a free trial through 90, the software platform that helps teams build great companies. If you are interested in learning more about partnering with Impact Architects or by leveraging 90 to power your own business, please go to ia.layoftheland.fm. The link will also be in our show notes. So Embrace ultimately goes through a series of acquisitions culminating in 2023. And I would love to hear about what those were like for you. How did the first one come to be? The subsequent ones come to be? What were your thinking along the way? Was that the ultimate goal when you thought about success? Did the meaning of success change along the way? And ultimately, the kind of lessons learned from that transition in ownership. And I realize there's a lot of series of questions in that one question. So, feel free to take us through it however you'd like and have thought about it.
Yeah. So just to clarify, we had 2 VCs, so that one in October 31st, 2008. Yes. And then 5 years later, we sort of swapped out, one VC came and bought out the other VC and some of the other investors, early investors. And we were in a minority position right from actually that October 31st, 2008. And that's definitely a lesson learned, financially for us. And this is, kind of what people don't typically talk about. But it would have made more sense to not take the funding and to not go further. But that's not who we are, right? And I have no regrets we didn't do that. But financially being put into a minority position right from basically the get-go, we never made it up. And our investors all made it. They benefited greatly from our efforts. And the follow-on, right? The follow-on companies. We exited in 2017. So we weren't there. The first actual acquisition of Embrace from the VC was in 2019. And they sold the NSM bought Embrace, which is a subsidiary of White Mountains, which is that invests in insurance. And then the second acquisition after that, I am not going to get my timing precisely here. It was sort of maybe two something years ago when Carlyle bought NSM, if I'm getting this right. And then, so Embrace sort of went along with that. And then recently, JAB bought Embrace out from NSM. And that was it was reported at $1.5 billion. It wasn't officially confirmed by by JAB. They were not talking publicly about it, but I do have good sources who, I wouldn't be saying that number, but I have good sources that can confirm. Let's just say that it's quite accurate. But so I have to admit, there's a sort of a bittersweetness to it, right? But I must say that I really do believe that what we created and built led to those valuations. And there's a little bit of insanity in the market at the moment, I must say. Some people would look and say the JAB acquisition, because of all the investors, Carlyle did the best. They bought it in a little package with NSM and then spun it out separately. And, the current CEO, Brian Macias, apologies, Brian, if I mispronounced your name, has obviously done a fabulous job of growing what was there. And I think hopefully has appreciated what was set up. And there were quite a few senior management people who were from our days too. So I like to think that things have held up well. And I think I am very proud of what we've done. But let's just say I'm still looking for a job. I mean, I'm not retiring on any of these billions of dollars that people might wonder. But I think I wouldn't change. I mean, obviously, if you could go back and change things, you might wish to. But what we did was at a certain time period that couldn't really have been done differently. I mean, obviously, if I was a different person, maybe, but for me personally, I couldn't have done anything differently. The environment and the timing was such as it was, but we were able to, the industry today, I would like to think, and, is very much influenced by some of the things that we did. And partly, it helps. NAPFIA, the North American Pet Health Insurance Association, was founded at the very beginning. I wasn't an actual initial founder because we couldn't afford to fly out to the first meeting. I just couldn't do it because it was out west. But I joined quickly thereafter, and then as a group turned it into something that we can measure the size of the industry today because of the work that was put in back then. But the design of the products, what we designed, Alex and I, this customizable risk-based approach for pet insurance did not exist before, and not even really in Europe either. And so I like to think that we brought quite a new approach. Now, some may curse us today because of this, because we created a product that covered practically everything except pre-existing conditions. And we came up with an innovative wellness product that went alongside. So we were sort of more full service. And there are certainly issues today in pet insurance that has become incredibly expensive, and that there needs to be a more slimmed down approach to product as well, right? There's always a room for this big product, but there should be probably broaden the people that we reach if in the industry. If we had another product that also perhaps either narrowed the scope, they tried the keeping everything covered, but just narrowing what gets paid out. And that, to me, just leads to disappointment. So
I'll bring something back from earlier on, which was, when you were doing the original business plan and you had this chart and it's up and to the right and, kind of forecasting where Embrace might ultimately go. And it sounds like, it hasn't actually deviated perhaps too far from where you had thought.
Oh, yeah. No, it's actually gone well beyond what we imagined. We were projecting, 100 million of premium, and it was in a short period of time. So that was, as it was far too optimistic and much harder to sell pet insurance than we had imagined. And I remember another CEO of a pet company, just not a pet retail company, laughing at me and saying that's ridiculous. And it was, when the time frame 5 years or whatever came and went, I was like, oh, failure, we haven't done what we wanted. But the hockey stick and COVID really, really helped things. And we put in a couple of partnerships before we left, USAA and Geico in particular, that both did phenomenally well for the growth of the company. And they were just getting going. And then they really sort of accelerated forward. So some really good things, happened to tee that up. And obviously Brian has done a fabulous job of continuing that growth. And looking at the company results and looking at the industry, Embrace has become a big player in it on just that 7 million, that original 7 million. Yeah. So it was done in a non-traditional way, but yes, it's exceeded expectations, I would say.
So with that in mind, I am curious how, kind of both of you have thought about what success was and how, what success is now, and, ultimately the impact that you were hoping to have with Embrace, and how you've thought about that, kind of navigating the relinquishing of control, some of the lessons learned along the way, with minority ownership and things of that nature. Just the reflections on where it is and how you feel about it.
You never really stop thinking about the companies that you've started and run. And so I think there's different levels of, at least for me personally, there's different levels of learning. And, some of these occur immediately, right? Like when you cut your finger by, sticking it at the door, or, ouch, don't do that again. So there's immediate stuff like, no, don't do that in business, bad idea. And then there's longer term things that sometimes stretch out over years. I think back on all the things we did well. I think we were very picky about who we hired, and we had a people first culture. There's, you could be forgiven in this day and age for thinking that businesses talk about this. There's a lot of platitudes. We really meant it. And we were picky about the people we hired. Folks who didn't fit the culture for various reasons usually didn't stick around for very long. And we were, as Laura and I wrote, founding principles for Embrace. And we were, one of them was being open, honest, and transparent about who we are, what we stood for, resonated with customers, and resonated with staff. And so the lesson to me there is that stuff's only bullshit if you don't stand behind it. So, big lesson is it matters, and it matters a lot to the people and to your customers. So it's probably worth the effort, but mean it if you're going to do it. And then, personally for me, I came from a background in engineering where what mattered more was the financial and engineering success of the project. People were kind of just a means to an end in a way. And I give a lot of credit to Laura for this. Laura, she used to say she was always tending her garden. These were her direct reports. And I learned a lot from her, but not just the how, but the why it matters. And I've taken that into my companies subsequent to Embrace, and I actually enjoy that now. That's probably for me the biggest takeaway is I actually like working with people. If it looks different from Laura's approach, but I'm not the egghead engineer stuck in a room, like in Star Trek. There's Scotty down in the basement. It's like, I'll get her started, Captain. No, I think it's a combination of finding the right people, listening to them, and helping them be the best version of themselves. And I really enjoy that now. And so I think for me, one of the biggest lessons is, as I look at what to do with my future, a lot of it's going to come down to what opportunities I have to help other people. I like to think that I'm finding somebody to ultimately replace me. I'm going to do the best job I can do. I want people working for me who are going to be able to supplant me and do a better job than me. And I don't feel bad about it. I really don't, because, if they can do their job successfully and I can spend more time focusing on, the health and wellness of the people driving the business, I think that's success, big success. And I think it's greatly undervalued today, diminished by the number of not so great companies that make a mockery of principles like that. And I think they ought to teach it in B schools, and they ought to teach it in high school, and they ought to teach it everywhere. If you're going to lead people, actually mean it. So to me, that's a huge.
Yeah. No, it resonates. I think in a lot of ways, the mark of great leadership is how well people do in your absence.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes, I would like to take that. And your sort of, we talked about the minority experience, starting off that way. I mean, I have seen it still happen today, particularly with women, female founders. But that's because female founders come to me. I do a ton of mentoring, just because often I'm the only woman they know who's done somewhat well, despite all the challenges of the VC world and so on. And I tell people, if you start off in a minority position, you will not get it back. You will not work your way out. They will not feel sorry for you. They will continue to benefit from your efforts. And so you have to decide, is that okay? I mean, it's that. And we just, we chose what we chose. And I am very, very proud of it. So there's definitely that, but I think there's a reality to it, and no one is out to help you. If you've got stuck where you are, then do you want to keep going or what? We'll all decide. So that's that. But I do keep in touch with some as we call them embracers, and they're dear friends, and I'm very very happy that they're still enjoying their work and the purpose of what they do, and that it means something good to them, and that they still continue to learn. So I think that's pretty awesome and cool. And I know Embrace doesn't show up because technically, were we actually a tech firm, or were we? There's many real things about Embrace. It's got real people answering phone calls. It's got but we're highly tech enabled, digital end-to-end experience. I'd say yes, we're a tech company, and I would like us to show up on the list. When I say us, of course, it's not my company anymore, but I feel like that Embrace is owed that recognition as to what it is, and should show up on the list of tech companies that are unicorns, etc. today.
Absolutely. On this topic of people and culture that both of you have raised, so there's almost this comical stigma about group projects in college and university. And so I kind of love that is the origin story and where your collective, begins, because it's so evidently not the case for both of you. So I'd love to how you would describe the evolution of your relationship with each other through these various stages of growth over the years.
Oh, that's a fun. Gosh, actually, we would because there was sort of a male and a female founder.
Yeah.
One of I'd always tell people this. People would ask us if we were married, and I'd say, yes, we are, just not to each other. But we had many life things that were very similar. I mean, I'm 9 years older than Alex, I believe. So 7 years, maybe, I think, older. I don't know. And it didn't really matter, but we were sort of, I suppose, like brother and sisters. Although people would at work, when we would get mad at each other, they would say, "Oh, mum and dad are arguing again." But we actually, for the whole time, we were like, at the beginning, Alex was in Philly and I was in Cleveland, but we were very tight in what we were trying to do and achieve. And that was, as I said, we started off running, we knew where we wanted to go. And we both had the same work ethic and ownership and responsibility for what we were to do and contribute to the whole. And but when we actually physically lived near each other, we're like a mile away. We would meet every Friday mornings. We lived in this little town called Chagrin Falls. I'm sure, because this is Cleveland-based, Chagrin Falls.
Absolutely.
And at the Starbucks that's right on the falls, looking out at, the goslings jumping off the waterfall there. It was actually, we met every morning on Fridays to kind of get out of the office and just kind of reconnect. Because sometimes we wouldn't speak to each other all day at work because I would go into work all the time. We did, from the very beginning, it was three days in the office and 2 days off for everybody. So the whole hybrid thing is not new, but we just wanted that. And so we just, reconnect, and we developed over the years. I mean, we've had life events happen to each other. I mean, we are family and we see each other now still, not as frequently, but we still have this amazing connection and understanding. It doesn't need to be much said about certain things, it just is what it is, as we like to say.
And when I fill out forms for travel and stuff, and it says, who's a non-family contact, I always put Laura's name down. So, if I ever go down in a fiery crash somewhere, Laura's cell phone's going to light up and be like, "Oh, Ms. Bennett."
And I'll be like, "Oh, that damn Alex put me on the list, didn't he?"
Yeah, in many ways, I think entrepreneurship is a journey that's best done with two. In fact, I've heard of venture capitalists and seed funding outfits that basically won't fund single founders; they want co-founders. And I think there's a lot of common sense in that. But I also think Laura and I had, from a strictly strategic relationship, as far as Embrace is concerned, was incredibly valuable. We generally saw eye to eye on what the most important things were, even if they were nebulous. What did Einstein say? Just because you can measure it doesn't mean it matters, and not everything that matters can be measured. And I think that's really true in entrepreneurship land. If you put a value on two co-founders, imagine if they were like, chalk and cheese, and they didn't like each other and didn't get along, that would be destructive to the value of the company. And there's just no way that would be sustainable long-term. Investors would probably go one or both of them. But in our case, I think we were stronger together. The core of an atom consists of, protons and neutrons, and Laura and I were protons and neutrons, right? It was very hard to unstick. And we stood by each other. It was, I want to say it was probably one of the healthiest relationships I've had. That's not to say that all my relationships have become healthy, but it was a good relationship, right? Like we disagreed on things, but we resolved things objectively and amicably for the most part. And, Laura was a sounding board. I go, hey, Laura, I have this crazy idea. And she'd be like, sit on that one for a while, shall we? Which was her way of saying, well, let's give it to you. But the answer was never like, no, right? And vice versa. So we think, in a sense, we let common sense prevail. And, one of my favorite things was, cream will always rise to the top, right? The good ideas keep coming up again and again and again and again. And we would acknowledge this and unfold it into our day-to-day, So we were beneficial. Like, Laura built this incredibly detailed financial model that drove the business, and that was worth its weight in gold. And we were able to kind of see around corners with it. And it enabled us to do a lot of very long-term planning and be very deliberate about the things we do in Embrace. Okay, we need to hire a person to do this in this time frame, and that's going to cost this much. And we need to invest in, server this and, software platform that, and blah, blah, blah. And it was all very methodical and structured. And so when investors came looking for data, we're like, here you go. I like to think that it was a fantastic relationship. I wish there was some sort of workshop we could do where, like, how did you tell if you're compatible with your potential co-founder? And if you know them, that's great, right? If they're a friend or a family member or whatever. But what if you don't and you're forced to work together? How do you decide if you're compatible? I don't know. Interesting. Something to think about, maybe.
Oh, I love that. That's very special. It's awesome. Well, I think, we've covered a lot of ground. I know there are many more things we could talk about, but I want to leave a little space before we bookend the conversation to ask if there is anything you feel is unsaid that is particularly salient in your reflection on the journey, that is important, that you'd like to share or bring up.
I don't know. We've said a lot. I mean, I would just add to that. Actually, I mean, I think also what really is a core, we have huge respect for each other. And I don't think you can have a relationship if you don't have respect. You don't have to like someone. And sometimes I didn't like Alex. I mean, it was just, it was a struggle. It's hard to imagine it just for a moment, be like, but always respect. So, I mean, I think that's true of any relationship in general, but this was very important for us. But no, I think that it's interesting, the changes in Cleveland. Sometimes I feel like not much has changed as much as it would be desired. And I would like to say that during this time, I had two children. Ellie is 20 and Erin is 18. They grew up with Embrace. And we have many, and Alex has 3 children, and they grew up with Embrace too. And I think there's a lot to be said about stories around children and having children and doing all that you do as an entrepreneur. So that could be a good, interesting, different podcast. Just in general, I'm sure you could find lots of people who could contribute that. It's not really talked about. But I think that my daughters, one day one of them said to me, I looked you up on Google, Mom. And I was like, oh, what did you find? She goes, you're kind of famous. It's like, and I'm like, well, not really, but yes, okay. If you wish to think so, absolutely. And this is Embrace is an amazing company, and it's just ridiculous to think how it just came from nothing. 2 people with a business idea. It stuck with it for 14 years. It was 14 years when we left. Mm-hmm. So that's a long time and a hard slog. I needed time off after that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the children, because I'm just kind of a fun aside. I don't have the exact numbers on this, but anecdotally, I would say across, all the founders who've been on the podcast, one of the real patterns is that the story of their parents is really embedded within their own story, which is, I think, generally true of parenting. But the entrepreneurial folks of today often had entrepreneurial parents, and that is what they grew up in it, and they have this lack of aversion to risk and just trying to figure stuff out for themselves.
I think in this case we have we are immigrants and have immigrant experiences, and both our fathers were in the military, and we moved frequently, both of us. I think there's something in that. And my mother was she was a small business owner, and so there's a little bit of that. But I didn't know I was an entrepreneur until it revealed itself that I was, and I couldn't not accept that. It was a wonderful thing to discover.
Yeah, I want to follow you there, Laura, on that immigrant path. I became a US citizen a number of years ago, and I practical myself both an Australian and an American. I pick and choose which one I feel more strongly about, depending on who's playing who in the Olympic Games. But in all seriousness, this is a country that is built by, honestly, entrepreneurs. I mean, think of all the big companies. They may be big today, and some of the people may have been a bit scandalous, but it's been immigrants are a huge part of the success of the United States in all their different, countries of origin. But I see so many founders. I think as a country, we ought to make it easier for people to come here to the US to live out their dreams and to give it a shot. Because if there's one country on earth that really lets you do that, it's the United States. So I hope we continue to do that as a country. I feel really passionate about it. I love meeting people from all walks of life, all different countries, and God knows there's a lot of them doing their own thing. And I think we need to encourage it. We need to encourage our kids to do it. Again, it's not a journey for everybody. There's nothing wrong with not following that path. But I hope we as a country don't change that. I hope we continue to encourage the entrepreneurs among us, those who are willing to, to take that wild swing into the future. Because I think it's the key economic driver of this country is innovation. And, you read about us versus, say, Europe, like the US is killing it in terms of productivity and growth. Other countries are lagging behind. And I think a lot of it has to do with our sort of individual entrepreneurial spirit, even if that's lived out in the corporate environment. So for what it's worth, that was a huge, I've never been anything less than blessed and grateful for the opportunities I've had in the US.
That's powerful. Yeah, it certainly resonates. Well, I want to then ask about Cleveland as we wrap up here for, just parting thoughts and reflections on what it had meant to build Embrace here. Then ultimately for our traditional closing question, which is for a hidden gem in Cleveland, something that other folks should know about that maybe they don't.
Well, my husband and I came to Cleveland because of his job, but I must say many things were very good coming to Cleveland, and the cost of living, the fact there were a lot of hungry people who were smart, but really, were looking for something interesting to do, and the desire, the location for me, my parents, my sister in Canada, in southern Ontario, so not too far away. So it has been good, but definitely lots of challenges doing it here. But in terms of the people and the friends I've made, it's a great place, and it's the longest place I've ever lived is here in Cleveland. So that says a lot, I think.
I think so.
And if I was to say a hidden gem, well, I live in Chagrin Falls. It is a lovely place to live. I mean, there's plenty of hidden gems that I could specifically mention, but I found that the parks around Furring Meadows is a beautiful little park that I can walk to from my house. And it's when I say park, it's an outdoor area that's owned by, it's become an official space that's been designated. It's an amazing space. So just those kinds of little pop-up little spaces that you don't know are there, and then you can walk 5 miles in them. It's just, it's beautiful. And there's a lot of that. I'm sure everybody has their special place that they love going to in the Cleveland area, because there's many of those.
I'm going to be young, going to be less about the parks and stuff, although I fully admit that I enjoy them. But I'm a foodie, love to go out, try, new places. And one place that I've consistently always enjoyed is Le Petit Triangle, great little restaurant. I have no affiliation with them. I just think that they tick off a lot of boxes. Their beef sandwich is out of this world. Sorry to offend any vegetarians. But yeah, the combination of, prices and food and drinks, and not to mention the crepes, I may be a little bit hungry. That may be influencing what I'm saying. But I genuinely love those guys. Always enjoyed it. And then, in Sugar and Falls, I'm going to give you two, Jeff. I'm going to be a naughty boy. I'm a big fan of JoJo's. That's become that's where I hang out with my buddies. I drag Laura there, and that's sort of the go-to spot. So I don't know. Again, no affiliation with them other than just a good local watering hole. That and Sugar and Falls has changed the last 10 years. Used to be kind of sleepy and a little bit boring, and then there was some fires a few years ago. People who live there will know what we mean. And then there's been a bit of a rebirth. So the phoenix out of the ashes there is that it's become a hopping little place. So yeah, so when I'm in Cleveland, I have a house in Sugar and Falls, and catch up with Laura and my other friends there, and really enjoy it. So yay, JoJo's.
Well, those are both awesome hidden gems. Thank you for sharing, and thank you both for just sharing your story. Again, I think this is really fun to have gotten to listen to and learn a lot more about what this journey entailed for both of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. If folks had anything they wanted to follow up with either of you about, where would be the best place for them to do so?
Well, LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to find me. So it's pretty straightforward. Type in Laura Bennett and look for the person sitting on the green stairs in the picture. That's easy enough. So reach out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, same. And always open to ideas and mentoring, getting involved with local companies. So always happy to hear from fellow entrepreneurs.
Amazing. Well, Alex, Laura, thank you again. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Jeff.
Take care.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.